Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby.
And today we're bouncing right back into the world of Samus Aran. It's Metroid time.
Oh, yeah. We covered Metroid 1, we covered Metroid 2, we covered Metroid 3, Super Metroid, and now we're going to cover Metroid 4, which is actually the title of this game, according to one of the cutscenes in it. So,
really?
Yes, we did talk about Metroid Prime. So in 2002, Metroid Prime was kind of the flagship console release of the Metroid genre, or the Metroid series. It was a great return of the Metroid franchise to gaming. Hadn't seen a game in, was it like 8 years, 7 or 8 years? But it wasn't the only Metroid game released at that time. In fact, Metroid Fusion came out on Game Boy Advance basically the same day as Metroid Prime, give or take a day or two wherever you lived. There's a couple of different timelines there, but like they came out basically at the same time. So Prime was like the triumphant return and more risky one of the pair. It was a translation of the Metroid series staples into a 3D first-person shooter. So it was a bit different. I think it worked. You can go listen to our Metroid Prime episode if you want to hear how much I love Metroid Prime. But Metroid Fusion was like a proper sequel to Super Metroid. Metroid Prime takes place in between Metroid 1 and Metroid 2, so in the timeline it's pretty far back too. But in the opening text crawl at the beginning of Metroid Fusion, the game refers to itself as Metroid 4 and not Metroid Fusion. Much how if you look at the opening cutscene for Super Metroid, it says Metroid 3. Same kind of.
Does this mean I need to call this episode Metroid 4 Fusion?
Metroid 4 Fusion. No, it's just Metroid Fusion. It doesn't say 4 on the cover, so I think that the official title is still Metroid Fusion.
Are there Fusion fans that are more Fusion-y than Prime-y?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
we'll get into that. We'll get into that. It's not that Fusion is a bad game, but we'll get into its reception here in a little bit.
But it's not the Prime game.
It's not Prime. That's right. It was like, well, we'll get into it. But so Metroid Fusion refers to itself as Metroid 4, signifying that it is like a true sequel to Super Metroid, and it also continued the series' oscillation between home console and handheld device. So the first Metroid, NES, second Metroid, Game Boy, third Metroid, Super Nintendo, fourth Metroid, Game Boy Advance. So we're going back and forth. So when Metroid 5 comes out, get ready for that, because it's going to be on the Switch, and we're all going to be real confused by it probably.
I'll be like, what's happening?
Because that's both home console and handheld. So whatever you want to like.
They're going to do this Metroid Prime 4. That's in the works, right?
Yeah, Metroid Prime 4 is. I don't know why I said Metroid 5. As far as I know, there's no Metroid 5 happening. But Metroid Prime 4 is apparently in development at Retro Studios.
Or you're just calling your shot right now. You know?
That's right. Yep.
This is it. This is your Babe Ruth point to the stands moment, but it's
way
to
in
Nintendo
advance.
About Metroid 5.
Yeah, I think we got to be looking at getting a Switch sequel at some point here soon, or at least an upgraded Switch, right?
Aren't they doing
4 years?
Wait, are you talking about Metroid or are you talking about the Switch as a console
The Switch
itself?
as a console itself.
Yeah, they're doing a Switch Pro, I thought. Isn't that a thing?
Yeah, that's the rumors. I don't think they've announced anything, but there's like rumors.
A professional Switch. A Switch, when you play it, you make money while playing it.
Wow. I would totally buy that.
I would too. That would be a great job. All right, sorry. We'll get back to it. I feel like I'm interrupting you already. We haven't even gone to the Grime Facts yet. Jeez.
So the Game Boy Advance was still pretty new at the time. Nintendo loved putting new games out on it that showed how much power the system had. I remember the cover of the box of the Game Boy Advance said 32-bit. I think at the end of the day, it was basically better than the Super Nintendo. I think some of the sound functions of it weren't quite as good. But pretty much it was a Super Nintendo in your pocket, which was totally bonkers to me as a kid because I grew up with the Super Nintendo. And the Game Boy Advance would get a lot of Super Nintendo ports of Super Mario World, Link to the Past, Yoshi's Island, all these Super Nintendo games. But Metroid Fusion was a brand new game, all its own, on the Game Boy Advance. You ready to get into the Grime Facts, Mike?
This is my favorite segment.
Let's get into the Grime Facts. We call them Grime Facts because Grimes on our Discord.
Brett Grimes
told us, he was like, you got to have these facts at the top. So we did. Thank you for that. So the developer is Nintendo R&D 1, which is the same group that made Super Metroid. I don't think it was like the same people. Like I think R&D 1 probably consists of several teams that all work on different games. So it wasn't a lot of the same people that made Super Metroid, but it was within that same R&D 1 group. It came out in North America on November 18th, 2002, in Europe on November 22nd, 2002, Australia, November 29th, 2002, and in Japan, February 14th, 2003.
Valentine's Day?
Yeah, I guess celebrating
romance.
Samus's union with the ex-parasite.
Very romantic. It's a romantic day.
I imagine that it was timed to come out at the same time as Metroid Prime in Japan, which came out a little bit later because Metroid Prime was made by Retro Studios in Texas, and it was not made by Nintendo in Japan. Metroid Fusion sold 940,000 copies, according to Wikipedia. That was by about 2006, so I think that's probably when they stopped printing it, if I had to take a guess.
I feel like it's really good for 2006.
Yeah,
like,
I think
not like
that's
video
pretty
game
good.
numbers now, but still really good. Successful financially, right?
Yeah, it was definitely successful. I think it feels a little low to me, but it was more than Metroid Prime 2, not as much as Metroid Prime 1, and not as much as Super Metroid. So there you go. The genre, gameplay style, it's Metroidvania. We've been talking about them for months now, it feels like. I think it actually has been months that we've been talking about Metroidvania games. It won a lot of awards. Handheld Game of the Year at the 2002 Interactive Achievement Awards. It was chosen as the Best Game Boy Advance Adventure Game by IGN, Best Action Game on Game Boy Advance by GameSpot, and they had named it the Handheld's Best Game of November 2002 also. It was runner-up for Best Sound, Best Graphics, Best Story, and Game of the Year among Game Boy Advance games on GameSpot. So it did pretty well. People generally like this game. Average time to complete, this is from howlongtobeat.com, about 5 hours. So pretty short.
Yeah.
Even for a Metroid game, this is pretty short because they're not known for being long. In fact, like that's one of the reasons I think they're so popular with speedrunners is because you can do a full Metroid, like Super Metroid run in a couple hours, you know? Even if you're good enough, you can get 100% everything in a couple of hours.
I have questions about speedrunning.
Okay.
Can you answer those for me? Are you a speedrunning aficionado? You know what?
I
You
am
watch
not,
speedrunning?
but I may still be able to answer your questions.
Is it still like? I think if it's speedrunning and you're using bugs, that's just not speedrunning. Is this a controversial subject that I just brought up?
Yeah, I don't think it's controversial, but there are definitely different categories. So like there's categories for best run where you get it 100%. There are categories of any percent where they don't care what you've done to get it. There are glitchless runs where you can't use glitches.
That's what I'd be into, I think, because I've been watching a lot of speedruns where it's like, oh yeah, I just stand in this corner and like stare at this thing for like 20 seconds and then I glitch out of the map and then I'm just
just run to the end. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, okay, well that's a really exciting video I just watched. Thank you.
Yeah. For me, I think it depends on the game. Like some games with lots of glitches are fun if they're like using small glitches to like bypass, small segments of the game where they're like, oh yeah, using this glitch, I save 30 seconds. I like that kind of stuff. But there are some glitch things in like Ocarina of Time where if they do things a certain way and then backflip over a door, like an early doorway in the first dungeon, it'll just go to the credits scene because they've like sort of manipulated the memory of the game to take it to the credits instead of that. And they're like, I beat it. And you're like, well, but did you though? That's not as interesting to me. I mean, I guess the technicalness of like how it works is kind of interesting to me. I'm not interested in it as a speedrun category, I guess.
We'll talk more about it when we get to the history of speedrunning, which we got to do. We have to do it.
Yeah.
Like that's gonna have to happen. So we'll do it at some point.
But the short length of Metroid Fusion was kind of one of the knocks against it. Because, like I said, even for a Metroid game, it's pretty short. But this game does have a Metacritic score of 92 out of 100. So, that was a knock against it, but it wasn't turning anybody away.
Real good game.
Yeah, very good. So let's move into the gameplay of Metroid Fusion. It's a lot like Super Metroid. It's a 2D side-scrolling platform where you jump, you shoot bad guys, you make your way through a space station, uncovering the secrets of the X-Parasite, which we'll get to the story in a minute here. It does have its differences from the other games in the series. Mainly, it's a lot more linear than a game like Super Metroid. There's a lot less backtracking in it than in other Metroid titles. For me, I didn't mind it. I was a 12-year-old who loved any game I could get my hands on in 2002. So I wasn't the best judge of how good a game is. It also was my first 2D Metroid game growing up too, so I didn't have a Super Metroid to compare it to or anything like that.
Like if you make video games and you need a review, grab 12-year-old Tyler to review your game because he will like it.
Oh man, and he would love to review your game too, I'm sure. So anyway, you make your way through the space station. You get upgrades along the way because, surprise, there's a reason that Samus loses all of her powers at the beginning of the game. The ship's computer is the one that gives Samus mission objectives, not the space station, her ship, I think. And controls which areas of the space station are open. So the computer will you'll get to locked doors that just won't be open until you've made sufficient progress. And in other Metroid games, like you would need a specific item to open that door. They don't really do that in Metroid Fusion, so that makes it just much more linear and much less backtracking, a little bit more focused. I think maybe that would be the positive spin on it, much more focused. So it's really hard to do the sequence breaking stuff that speedrunners and other enthusiasts love to do with Super Metroid, where you could like skip items if you knew how to do stuff without those items. You can't really do that in Metroid Fusion. I don't think there's like a robust speedrunning community for Metroid Fusion the same way there is for Super Metroid because of stuff like that.
We're going to get one angry email from the one Metroid Fusion speedrunner after this.
Yeah, well,
how dare you?
Maybe we're wrong. I will admit I didn't do a deep dive on Metroid Fusion speedrunning, so
people have found flaws in our research.
Yeah, I will take your criticism.
I will take that L.
Yep. So as Samus makes her way through the space station, she regains her suit's abilities, just like in other Metroid games. Either she downloads them at specific locations on the station or by absorbing special X-parasites. Again, we'll get to X-parasites in a minute, but they're the main antagonist of the story, and Samus has kind of a complicated relationship with them. So, despite the 8-year gap between Fusion and Super Metroid, Nintendo didn't really come up with any new like power-ups for Samus to collect. There's the wide beam, which functions kind of like the Spazer beam from previous entries, except the beam is like 3 rings instead of 3 beams. There's also diffusion missiles, which are kind of like an upgrade to the super missiles that combine with the ice beam. It's kind of similar to the ice spreader in Metroid Prime. Otherwise, it's not super exciting. I mean, it's a very useful item, but it's not like, they're just not groundbreaking. They're not defining the genre with the ice spreader. You don't have to switch between beams, which you did have to do in Super Metroid. So they all just kind of stack on each other. That's kind of nice. A little bit of a streamlined quality of life thing. But the good news is that almost every other power-up in the Metroid series is in Metroid Fusion. So there's like a ton of power-ups to grab in this game. And you don't have to worry about missing any of them because the game is so linear. It just kind of takes you right to each one. And then you know what to do to move on.
I like that because I'll get to this when we talk about what we've been playing this week, but I've been playing a game where if you miss something, they throw it later on in case you missed it, and it feels nice. It feels cool. Nice that they do that. Yeah, we'll talk about that when we get to the end. But
I'm excited to hear about it.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it with you because we missed last week, so I'm like, oh man, we got so much to talk about. Okay,
we got a lot to catch up on.
We do.
Yeah. There are a lot of bosses in Metroid Fusion, 13 of them. All of them give you sweet power-ups after you beat them, I think. Yeah, so
that's great. I love a good boss fight.
Yeah, it's also got a lot of some of the scariest bosses of Metroids, I think, because the whole time you've got this evil clone of Samus wandering around the space station, and she has all of your power-ups. So as you're trying to power up to like be able to take this person on, you'll see them a few times, and they're just blasting things away because they have all the power-ups, and it was spooky, and it kind of scared me when I was a kid. Not gonna lie.
She's like the scary version of Gary from Pokemon Red.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Scary Gary walking around the space station.
Yeah, Scary Gary. But imagine the first time you met Gary, he's got like level 70 Venusaur, and you're sitting here with your level 8 Squirtle, you know?
I hated that they always took the Pokemon that was harder to fight.
I know.
I mean, it makes sense. But Gary, you're such a jerk, Gary. Okay.
Yeah. What a jerk. But that's kind of the gameplay of Metroid Fusion. If you've played Super Metroid, you kind of know what you're in for here. It's a little bit streamlined, a little bit more quality of life stuff, not having to switch beams and stuff around like that. But that's fine because it was awesome to just have like a modern portable Metroid game on Game Boy Advance, and I think that's one of the reasons I love the game so much. It's because I just like
great.
It really is like a great game. And I think it has a really cool story too. So we'll talk about that before we talk about like the development of the game.
Yeah, I actually have a Game Boy Advance, so this is kind of intriguing to me if I can find this used somewhere. I'm hoping I could.
Yeah, I think you probably could. We'll also talk about different ways you can play it as well. But Metroid Fusion in the storyline, in the chronology of Metroid, takes place after Other M, so that makes it the latest in the series chronologically. Like there are no games that take place beyond Metroid Fusion. Samus goes back to SR-388, the Metroid homeworld from Metroid 2. She's being a bodyguard for the team of scientists down there. They're doing research or something. She kills an enemy because that's her job, is to be their bodyguard. But this enemy has something different inside it. It's got a life form known as the X-parasite. So the X-parasite, in the time since the eradication of the Metroids on SR-388 in Metroid 2, the population of this X parasite has just exploded on that planet because the parasite's only natural predator were the Metroids.
This is just basic biology here. Loving it. Loving it.
So we're disrupting the ecosystems here. And when you're in Metroid 2, you're killing those Metroids off, you're disrupting the ecosystem of SR388. And that kind of ends up being a problem. So the X parasite explodes out of this thing that she killed, and she absorbs it as it ejects from the body of that thing. Initially, she doesn't have any trouble. She's just like, whoa, that was weird. But once she gets back to her ship, she passes out, and she has to be ejected from the ship before it crashes. So she recovers, but the X parasite has multiplied itself inside of her and latched on to the biological parts of her suit. So she's going to die here. They did some surgery to remove those parts of the suit that are like fused to her. Hence the name, Metroid Fusion.
I see.
But it looks pretty bad. Like they give her less than 1% chance of survival. But then someone finds a cure. So we know that Metroids are the natural predator of the X parasite, right? So they make a vaccine from the remains of the baby Metroid that Samus saved all the way back in Metroid 2 that gives its life for you in Super Metroid. Now we're still using the dead body of this baby Metroid to make vaccines against the X parasite, which basically clears her out. Pretty much clears it from her body. She loses most of her power-ups, obviously, because we need to make up a story reason for that to happen, and because her suit was so destroyed. They take pieces of her suit back to the space station that we're going to talk about in a minute. But basically, she's like part Metroid, which I guess is really where the Metroid Fusion title comes from, because now she's got Metroid DNA floating around in her. Thanks once again to that baby Metroid. That's really just, they keep bringing that back, and I really love it. I really enjoy it.
The baby Metroid is the real hero of the Metroid series.
That's
we
right.
all agree on that.
Yeah. So that's why it's called the Metroid series, is because the Metroids are actually not the bad guys. Well, I don't know about that, but
they made the X parasite go away. This whole thing is about how this whole thing is just a giant metaphor for environmentalism, and I love it.
And unforeseen consequences, right? You take out the annoying thing in an ecosystem, and some other annoying thing now is propped up because that they weren't fighting. You know,
it's like, oh, you have mice, you add cats. One of the so many cats, you add dogs, and it just spirals out of control. You know.
So Samus heads over to the BSL Space Laboratory. BSL stands for Biological Space Laboratory. So it's the Biological Space Laboratory, it's a space station that studies biological life. And parts of her infected suit are there, and the X parasite is there and is discovered to be able to create copies of the organic life that's already on the ship. So big yikes. We got to go figure out what's going on the space station because there's X parasites everywhere. Samus quickly learns that the parasite has created a copy of her, and that copy is wandering around the space station, fully powered up, doing bad guy stuff. And later on, there are multiples of that copy. We call it SA-X, Samus Aran X, I guess. There's like a bunch of them on the ship later on, and it's very scary. So
this is like a body snatcher, spooky story kind of thing going on.
Yeah. So she spends her time getting ordered around the ship by her ship's computer, who suspiciously reminds her of a character named Adam, who is her old commanding officer. She goes around recovering pieces of her suit, beating bosses, tracking down evil Samus. There's also some other nefarious stuff happening on the station, like research on Metroids, which were all supposed to be dead, but we're still doing research on Metroids, which is pretty scary. The Federation gets real stoked on this X parasite because they think there's probably some like military applications for it. But Samus is like, nah, dog, these things are crazy. We can't keep studying them or we'll all die because of how infectious the parasite is. She's worried that they might be able to like take over the galaxy if they're not stopped where they are. They're kind of like the Flood in Halo. She's just worried that this is just going to take over everything and we're going to have to activate the Halo rings to get rid of the X parasite.
They're like the Flood, but instead of being gross, they just look like you and take everything over, which makes it way worse.
Yeah, which just makes them even scarier because you don't even know what you're looking at, if it's a parasite. So, spoiler alert, we destroy the X parasite. She gets helped by the animals that she saved on Zebes. Is that what we decided it was, Zebes? Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, because in Japan, it was Zebeth, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those animals that were optional to save on your way out in Super Metroid, they help you out in Metroid Fusion. So there's a whole theme of saving someone and then they can come save you later in the Metroid series. And also of ecological disasters. If you remove a predator from a ecological system, you're going to have a bad time.
Everyone knows that.
Yep. So I think this is one of the better Metroid stories. I like that they keep bringing the baby Metroid back in to help Samus in these games. If they were going to adapt the Metroid story into like an anime, I think this would be the one to do it, because you could still have that super lonely feeling as she makes her way through the space station, even though you have like the computer talking to her, so you could get some dialogue there, because she does talk to the computer as well. She does a lot of self-monologues in the ship's elevators, and you know how much anime characters love to do monologues to themselves.
Describe exactly what they're doing. It's
exactly, and what they're thinking, and almost like...
And how you could have defeated them, but they did this thing that you didn't know happened, and then the other person did the thing that they didn't know happened, and it just keeps going and going. It's great.
Yeah. It's like the Sherlock Holmes movie with Robert Downey Jr. when he like describes exactly what he's going to do, before he does it.
It is like that, yeah. I didn't even put that together until just now.
That was a great movie. By the way, if you haven't seen the Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey Jr., you're missing out. They're great movies.
Yeah, not bad. Not as bad as I thought they would be,
Yeah. So, yeah, you get to like kind of get a look inside her head, which I think is kind of neat. She seems to have matured a lot after Other M. And like I said, as far as I know, this is her latest mission. It was the first 2D Metroid game to have animated cutscenes, which I also think is pretty neat. They're not like fully animated, like watching a cartoon here, but they have some full screen things that are pretty neat.
Hey, it's still very cool to have animated cutscenes in a handheld game, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about some development here. So the development on Metroid Fusion started in early 2001, maybe even earlier than that, but that's when Nintendo announced it as Metroid 4 on March 23rd, 2001. So that's before the Game Boy Advance launched in the US, and only a couple days after it launched in Japan. It was developed by Nintendo's R&D 1 group, like I said, which is the same group that made Super Metroid. And the lead programmer for Metroid Fusion said that they didn't really look at older Metroid games for inspiration on how to code the game, like how to like technically make it. I guess because it probably had been several years and it was probably just wiser to start from scratch. This team is the same team that had just finished making Wario Land 4. So he said, we kind of looked at that a little bit more than older Metroid games to figure out how to make this, because we had just made basically a 2D side-scroller on the Game Boy Advance. So we kind of already knew what we were doing.
I wonder if that's why the game is a little bit more linear than
it might be
previous titles too.
Yeah. They also said that they wanted to make it a little bit easier for people. They had the whole team go back and play Super Metroid to be able to know what they were getting themselves into. And most of the team agreed, like Super Metroid was kind of for hardcore gamers, I guess, or Nintendo fans. And so when they made Metroid Fusion, they wanted to broaden the audience a little bit. And so that's part of the reason they wanted to make it a little bit easier and make it a little bit more linear, I think goes along with making it a little bit easier.
The Castlevania thing we just talked about, trying to make it more accessible to people.
Yeah. So like originally they kind of were thinking about just doing a Game Boy Advance re-release of Super Metroid, which would have been probably really tempting for Nintendo to do because that's pretty easy, and I think a lot of people would have loved it. And I'm kind of sad they never did it, because I would have loved to play that too. But we did still get Zero Mission, which is pretty sweet. We talked about that when we talked about the original Metroid. And Zero Mission is pretty good too. So, but I think that team just generally likes working on new things, and so I guess I can't blame them. Like, there's a lot less room to innovate and have fun and make something new when you're just porting an old game, so I can't blame them for that. But still, we did get a lot of great Super Nintendo ports on the Game Boy Advance, and we just never got Super Metroid, which is kind of a bummer. But the team really wanted to redesign Samus because they thought her current design was getting too old. She'd sort of been redesigned for Smash Bros. On the Nintendo 64, mostly because they had to take her from 2D form and put her into 3D form and make it look pretty. So that's how they justified her fusion suit in the story. So because they really wanted to redesign her, so they went into the story and they said, well, okay, how can we justify this? Which is interesting to me because in development, I'm always interested in the relationship between how the story affects the gameplay, but then also the other way around, like how can the story affect the game, or how can the gameplay affect the story? And it seems like they sort of wanted the gameplay to affect the story a little bit here, where they're like, we want to redesign her, write the story so that we can redesign her.
Yeah, and as cheesy as you may think it is, it's obvious that they're writing this so they can do that. I'd rather have them try to justify it than not do that at all and just make it completely different. And you'll be like, wait, what?
Yeah, and her fusion suit is very organic and like it's a living suit, really. It's much less like hardware than it is like embedded in her system now. So it would have been weird to just do that without explaining it.
Yeah. Just be like, oh, my suit's alive now. Wait, what?
Yeah. It seems like development for the game went pretty smoothly and according to plan, which is pretty rare in the world of game development, or maybe it's just hard to find where they talk about problems that they had. This was also 20 years ago when the internet wasn't as big of a thing, so if they were having problems, they probably weren't like tweeting about it, you know?
Some would say it's a better time.
Yeah, it's a different time. Because if there's anything that I know about game development, it's that things rarely ever go according to plan. And so much so that if they actually do start going according to plan, it feels weird and wrong.
Yeah. In relation to web development, I feel like if it goes like really right for me, I'm like, I'm doing this wrong. This is too easy. This doesn't feel okay.
Yeah. If it works the first time, you're like, wait a minute, something's
like,
wrong here.
Why is this working? There's no way it's working. Yeah.
Yeah. Like this isn't supposed to work yet. But yeah, so that's kind of the development for it. There isn't a whole lot of information on it online. It seems to be like it went pretty smoothly. By this point, Nintendo was, 25 years into making video games. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, there's actually this old like adage that in class I'm learning about how it's like you want to have the problem where it's not working, but you know why, because it's worse to have the problem where it's working and you have no idea why it's working.
Yeah, because then when it stops working, you don't know why.
Exactly. It's definitely a problem, and I've definitely run into that over the last like 4 months. So
yeah,
it does feel weird.
You probably don't know as you start to add more things onto it. You're like, okay, which one of these things is going to be the one to break the thing that works that's not supposed to work?
Yeah, what breaks first? Here we go.
Yeah,
that's what the game I'm constantly playing now is what breaks first. So
yeah, so that's kind of the development here. When it comes to the reception and legacy of Metroid Fusion. Metroid Fusion was very well received by the gaming community at large. Most reviewing outlets praised the translation from the console game to Game Boy Advance. They felt like it was a true continuation from Super Metroid. The game was tight and fun, music was great, and it really felt like having a full console game in your pocket, and people were pretty stoked on that. The Game Boy Advance is really when I first started feeling like handheld gaming was getting those like console games in my pocket with all the Super Nintendo ports, mostly because I grew up with the Super Nintendo. So if it was a console game on Super Nintendo and it was on the Game Boy, I was like super stoked on that.
Oh yeah. That felt good. I thought like I was a big fan as a kid of the gimmick of when you would plug in your Game Boy Advance into the GameCube.
Yeah.
That was the thing. Like as far as gimmicky things go, I fell all in on that. I kept trying to do it at my friend's house. He had the GameCube, I had the Game Boy Advance.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And there were some games like Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles where to play multiplayer, you had to have a bunch of Game Boys in those cables.
Yeah, I think we talked about that in our Zelda segment as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Definitely a thing for some
there was
Zelda
a Four
games.
Swords game that you could play with Game Boy games. You could do that with Metroid Prime and Metroid Fusion, actually. So if you beat Metroid Prime and linked it up with Metroid Fusion, you got to unlock the Fusion suit in Metroid Prime, which was pretty sweet.
That's really cool, actually.
And if you had beaten Metroid Fusion, when you linked it up with Metroid Prime, you got to play the original NES game on your GameCube, which was really cool at the time, too, because Nintendo wasn't yet, like, there was no virtual console yet. Playing a full game inside of another console was still, like, kind of a new thing, I guess, which was pretty neat.
Yeah, the only games I can think of that did that were like Animal Crossing. Early Animal Crossing games had that like emulation where you could play older Nintendo games in your Animal Crossing world, right?
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like reviewers were generally pretty stoked on Metroid Fusion. The main things they criticized were the linearity. If you were a Super Metroid fan, it was a little bit of a step back. It felt like, I think, because of just the way the game was structured. And they criticized the length of the game because, it was a short game. I think the team was hoping players would play through it multiple times on like higher difficulties and go for faster times with higher percentage completion so that you could get the better endings because, it's a Metroid game, so there's a bunch of different endings, all of which sort of amount to just seeing Samus with less and less of her suit on, which is not really something a game developer, I think, would do today and consider it like a reward for seeing more and more skin of Samus. But, this was like almost 20 years ago, so.
Or just Master Chief's face. Huh?
Yeah, we'll never see Master Chief's face.
There's really something weird about video game developers in the 90s and 2000s being like, you want to see more of the character without their suit on, don't you? You weirdos.
Yeah, yeah, well, and there's an especially like weirdness around it when it comes to Metroid because like Samus is a girl, and it's like,
the minute they said that Samus was a girl, it's just like insert weird things you can do in this game. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but that was 20 years ago. Wow. Holy moly.
All I'm saying is if that happens in the newest Metroid Prime game on Switch, we should all boycott. Okay. I don't think it will. I think the times have changed.
If they're putting Samus in a bikini, I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, what do you do?
I'm okay with what they did in Metroid Prime was she took her helmet off and you got to see sort of more of her face. I'm okay with that. That's kind of cool.
That's fine. See a person's face, that's good.
Yeah.
But it's just, it gets weird. The longer back in video game history you go, the weirder it gets.
It gets pretty weird, yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I played this game kind of shortly after it came out, I think, because I picked up a Game Boy Advance on the day it came out, so I would have been able to grab this pretty shortly after the game came out. It was my first introduction to the Metroid universe, because it came out the same time as Prime, but I didn't have a GameCube when Prime came out. I would play that one a year later. So I played Fusion first, and I remembered liking it a lot. I beat it all the way to the end because I was, like I said, I was 12 at the time, which was pretty rare for me to actually finish a game. Going to be honest, I was still not good at video games, but I also wasn't good at video games back then either.
Tyler's really good at video games. He just will never admit it. So just know that. It's not true. I've seen him play video games. He's very good at them.
I can't even beat Jedi Fallen Order on easy. So
Jedi Fallen Order is a different kind of game, I think. And it's also, we can talk about more after you're done with this episode, but Jedi Fallen Order is difficult. It's very difficult.
Yeah. Well, I'm also not good, so that's why I had to stop playing it.
Ogda Bogdo is a terrible boss. We all know it, okay?
But it was, when Prime came out in 2003, a year later, I was like pretty familiar with Samus, so it was cool that my completed Fusion game could be hooked up to Prime to unlock the full NES Metroid game, which, like I said, was still kind of a novelty at the time. So that was pretty cool. But if I'm being honest, I don't think Metroid Fusion had too much of an impact on the genre as a whole. It definitely belongs in that genre. It borrows a lot from other Metroid games and probably some from Castlevania games, but I think as a whole, it's a pretty weak entry for the genre as far as innovation and pushing the genre forward. It just kind of took stuff that already existed and just did another game with it. And then on top of that, it was pretty linear. And so it wasn't anything special in terms of gameplay or Metroidvania genre definement, but it was still pretty good. The story was cool. The gameplay was tight and fun. So, you don't have to innovate everywhere in order to be a good game. It just needs to be a good game, right? So I think it was cool. But I don't.
Sometimes the game can just be good, just be good quality.
Yeah, but if you're asking a developer of a Metroidvania game, the list of games that influenced them, I don't think Metroid Fusion shows up on that list. But Super Metroid probably does, and probably Symphony of the Night does too. But that's kind of all I've got to say about Metroid Fusion. I think it's cool if you like Metroid games. It's not the greatest Metroid game, but it's still solid, still fun. The best way to play it these days is either just play it on your Game Boy Advance or play it on a Game Boy Advance emulator after you've bought the cartridge legally. Obviously, we don't have piracy on this podcast.
That's right. Everyone should buy a legal copy before they emulate.
Yeah. I would probably go the emulation route, or it was also released on the Wii U Virtual Console, so you could play that version too. There is another version of this game that came out on the 3DS as part of the 3DS Ambassador Program, which, if you're not a part of that program, then this is irrelevant to you. But if you bought a 3DS before the price drop that happened 5 months after the 3DS came out or something, Nintendo sort of said, hey, sorry, we charged you an extra $50. We're not going to give you $50 back, but here's a bunch of free Game Boy Advance games that they never released on the Virtual Console for the 3DS. And it was a lot of solid games. Metroid Fusion was in there, Super Mario World was in there, Mario Kart was in there. Lots of really top-notch GBA games came out on the 3DS only as part of the Ambassador Program, which my brother was one of those people. He got to play all those.
Your brother's an ambassador.
Yeah, he bought 3DS day one and was pretty bummed when very shortly after the 3DS came out, they dropped the price by $50.
That does feel bad. I'm glad they at least paid him back with these games that they will never see the light of day for anyone else,
Yeah. I think at this point, it's we're a decade later, Nintendo, you can release these games again. I don't think anybody's going to be mad about it today.
Yeah, I think I really want them to do because we got our Super Nintendo emulator on Switch. We got our Nintendo Entertainment System emulator. I want them to do a handheld emulator. I want them to do a Game Boy Advanced.
Game Boy Advance would be perfect.
Yeah, because that's not new enough that people with 2DSs and 3DSs are going to get upset. And there's a lot of good games on the Game Boy Advanced that they could throw out there. So,
yeah, that's it. That's all I got to say about that. What have you been playing, Mike?
Oh, well, I have had a crazy week, as you all noticed when we did not have an episode last week. Apologies about that again. But I did manage to get like a few hours in sporadically into Bioshock Infinite. So I am finally playing it. That's the game that has the mechanic that I was talking about before, where, for example, when you go first, I guess when you're like first in Colombia, you go to a vending machine and they're selling Bucking Bronco, the Vigor, for like way too much money. Like you wouldn't have that much money at all, in this by gathering all the stuff. And then I was like, oh man, I can't buy it. And then I found Bucking Bronco like 7 more times later out throughout the game so far. And I'm like, this is great, because it makes you feel like you're not missing anything. And Bioshock 1 and 2 would do that to an extent. But I'm going to be honest with you. I think Bioshock Infinite so far is so much easier than the first 2 Bioshock games.
I agree with that, I think.
It is like, I just Bucking Bronco, and I have the gear on that chains Bucking Bronco if I kill someone. And it's just like a shooting gallery of people flying up in the air and being like, bang. And then the next person flies up in the air and bang. And it just like goes in a chain like that as I go. And it's pretty fun though. I'm really enjoying it. I also feel like because the combat's not as hard, I can focus way more on like being immersed in the story. And I'm really digging it. So it's just really a matter of time for me to play it at night versus how the craziness that's going on in my life right now. So, but I'm really digging it. What have you been playing, Tyler?
This week, I'm still working on Persona. I'm probably 3/4 of the way through the 3rd dungeon in Persona 5 Strikers. So still having a good time there. But I don't have a whole lot more to say about it besides I'm just still playing it. That's kind of what I play in my off time these days. I haven't had a ton of free time. It's been kind of a crazy week for work. We both had
busy weeks. Yeah. It's like I'm going back in person to work, so it's getting crazy, and it's getting crazy for you too. And every time you say Persona 5 Strikers, I think it's a soccer game with Persona characters, so I get a little bit confused.
I would play that game. Oh man, a soccer game with like Persona characters from all the different Persona games would be so fun.
I think it's because it's Super Mario Strikers is the soccer game, right? So I just assume when you say Persona 5 Strikers, it's a soccer game. But yeah, It's been kind of crazy, folks. We're going to keep doing episodes, don't worry, but it's been a little crazy.
Yeah, we may take a little bit more breaks as these crazy weeks keep happening,
but hopefully they'll be few and far between, and we can get some stuff done for you. New episodes. I'm actually really excited to talk about our next topic next week, because our next topic next week I don't think has been recommended, and it kind of popped up in my brain as a time period that's recent enough that I think everyone will remember, but it is technically history. So I'm pretty excited to talk about it. But let's go into the emails, because we got some emails to read. And we're going to start with Alexa, because Alexa was asking on Discord. And I'm like, you're first in line for the emails. So this is from Alexa. Here we go. Hey guys, Alexa here. I finally caught up with the second half of your podcast. In the last 2 months, I sent my first email. I have just a few things I wanted to ask you guys today. Apologies in advance if this email is kind of all over the place. That's our specialty as far as emails and podcasting goes, all over the place. Okay. 1. Have either of you guys played Crosscode? It's very much old school Zelda games in its gameplay, but with some more RPG elements thrown in. It's got super charming feel and story to it, and is generally an uplifting game, and it's free on Game Pass. Definitely recommended. If it's free,
it's for me.
Exactly. Definitely recommended, since you guys have played older Zelda games. Well, you know what, Alexa, to answer your first question, you did say free on Game Pass, which is the magic phrase, which means I'm going to go download it later. Right after we get off this call.
I have not played it, so
I have not played it either.
Check it out.
But you said the magic phrase. Okay, number 2. Have either of you played anything in the roguelike genre? Things like Dead Cells, Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon, etc. It's definitely one of my favorite game genres, partly for the sheer replayability of them and just how addicting they can be. Well, I love Dead Cells. Tyler?
I also love Dead Cells.
I feel bad for never playing Binding of Isaac, because I know that's one of like the early roguelike indies that was like really big. You know? And Enter the Gungeon, I think I actually have it on my Xbox to play, because that's also on Game Pass.
Yes.
But I love Dead Cells. Dead Cells is so fun.
Yeah.
Big fan. Same. Number 3. Do you guys play Smash Brothers Ultimate? I think it'd be super fun if we got in some big 8-player matches with you guys and the Discord members. Would absolutely love to hear an episode on the history of Smash Brothers, and quite frankly, am surprised y'all haven't done it yet. I'm surprised we haven't done it yet too. I have it on the list. It's 100%. It was like one of the first things I put on our now like 100 items long list of episode ideas. But the craziest part about it for me is I've never played Ultimate. I was at a New Year's party where people were playing it, never got to switch in. I have a Switch. I don't own it, but I would purchase this game because I did love like Smash Bros. And Smash Bros. Melee to do this 8-player match with people on Discord. I would play it. Tyler, what are your thoughts on Smash Bros?
I think it's fun as kind of a party game when everybody's just messing around. It gets less fun if you have people who are like really good at it and tryhards. Because there can be a big skill disparity there, and I think it's not that fun when you play with that skill disparity. So as long as we're like not taking it seriously and we're goofing around, and we have like items turned on and stuff, I love it. Otherwise, it gets a little too sweaty for me. But it's fun. I think I love the idea of it, and I loved playing the original on N64, and I played quite a bit of Melee. But once you get into like the Brawl years, is when it started to get too serious for me.
That's actually right where I fell out, is Brawl. Yeah. I never played Brawl. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that it's more fun when you have like 800 Pokeballs on the screen and you're throwing them everywhere.
Yeah. Fully agree.
This next question, number 4, is for you, Tyler. Do you plan on getting the Demon's Souls remake at all? I know you have expressed some disinterest in more challenging aspects of the Souls games, but they can be extraordinarily rewarding and immensely gratifying when you finally overcome the hills you get stuck on. They are incredibly rich RPG experiences, and for me, personally, I have influenced my taste in games more than anything else in my 25 years playing games. If you did have interest, I own the game myself and could lend a hand in co-op if that ever comes up. Tyler.
That's very nice of you to offer that. I have the original Demon's Souls on PS3, and that's where I learned that I do not like that genre. And every time I've tried to come back to it in the years since, I still continue to not like it. I don't think I'm going to pick up the Demon's Souls remake at all. It is a little bit tempting just because I think it's still the only PS5 exclusive game right now that you can only play if you have a PS5. So there's like some allure there because I have a PS5, but it's just, I don't think it's for me. And I really wanted to like it when it first came out too, because people were talking it up big time a long time ago, 2009, far off year of 2009. But it's just, I don't think it's for me, but I appreciate the offer to help out in co-op.
You heard it here first, folks. Tyler does not want to be guided through Demon's Souls. I get it though. It's a hard game. It's it's like the first hard game, right?
Yeah.
The first
and
one?
It doesn't have any of maybe the PS5 version does, but it doesn't have any of the quality of life stuff that later Dark Souls games would have in them. And even with those quality of life things, I still couldn't get into the genre. And like, even like we talked about Jedi, where it's like baby's first Souls game, still not a fan, still can't do it.
You say baby's first Souls game, but it is hard. Like, that's
not to say it's an easy game. It's just, I know, easy but in terms of Souls games.
I'm saying that as in because I know you got really upset about it, or not upset, but you struggled with it, and you were like, I'm bad at it. I'm like, it's a hard game. You know, it's challenging.
Yeah. Well, I think didn't make me feel good to play, so I stopped playing.
I know. You know, hey, and that's like the best rule for any video game, honestly, because I have done the opposite of that and been like, I am bad at this game and I'm going to keep playing it until I'm good at it. And that is a very upsetting road, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, that's an okay road to go down if you're having fun while being bad, and you're like part of the allure is getting better, and that's fun too. There's nothing wrong with that, but I just wasn't having fun getting better at it. And I wasn't seeing much progress, so I was just like, I
got to continue my guided tour of Dark Souls that I was going on with a YouTuber, where I would watch their video and then go play what they played.
Oh,
and
that's not a bad idea.
It was like my guided tour. It felt like it was like Disneyland, but
that's cool.
Scary and gothic. Okay. So number 5 from Alexa, Mike, you had expressed interest recently in potentially getting a PS5 over the new Xbox. From someone who owns a PS5, I'd actually recommend you get the Xbox. You did mention that you can play games on your PC, which is definitely true, but being able to play all those games in such high frame rates and resolutions really enhances the experience so much. If you have an up-to-date PC performance-wise, then this is sort of a moot point. If it hadn't been for Demon's Souls, I'd definitely have gone with the Xbox Series X, even though I have a decently powerful PC and own an Xbox One. Spider Butts from the Bay Area, Alexa. I am on the fence still about these two. I think really what's going to make my decision, Tyler, is which one is available first.
Yeah, that's a great. That's
because
a pretty good,
honestly, you can't get either one still. I'm not going to go. wait on a website to click a button and pre-order it. I'm thinking not until maybe holidays is when I might even think about trying to get one.
Yeah, it may not be available till then.
Yeah, because it's kind of nuts. But I thank you for the advice, Alexa, because I am like, my PC is pretty good. Like, I'm playing all the new games fine so far. But yeah, I just can't decide, because also all my friends are getting Xbox. So if I got a PS5, I'd be committing to playing all these PS5 games solo, essentially, which is kind of a hot bummer, you know, when you think about it. Because
that's true. But if you're playing if they're PS5 exclusive games, you weren't going to play them with other people on the Xbox either.
That's true. That is true. So I have to choose between my friends or God of War.
Yeah, well, these are the questions. But I think I'm still like, I don't think the Series X is worth it if you have a PC, because most of those games are on PC and they have crossplay for the most part too. So like, you can still play with your friends who are on Xbox for all these new games that are going to be coming out, you know?
That is true.
And they even have crossplay across consoles too. Like if you're playing Call of Duty on PS5, you can play with your Xbox friends, no problem.
Yeah, well, I think the real test is going to be when Halo Infinite comes out, because that will come out before I even get a console, and I can test my friends being on their consoles and me being on my PC and seeing how that performs. And if it goes well, then yeah, I could see a PS5 in my future for sure. Yeah. I kind of like, I have this weird feeling where I don't trust it. Like, I worry there's something we're going to be wrong with the crossplay or something weird, and I just want to make sure I know it works before I purchase. But you know, we'll see what happens. Also, I got burned real bad, I feel like, from buying an Xbox One like year one. And granted, it still runs, so I didn't really get burned, but it is showing its age in performance. Like, when I try to play a new game, it's pretty, even an older game, like the Wolfenstein New Order game was like not loading in shaders and stuff. And I'm like, ugh, looks kind of bad. Okay. Wow, that was one long email. Let's do another one. Here we go. This is from Tyler F. You want to read Tyler's email?
Sure. I also have that name, so therefore I'm qualified to read the email.
This is like reading it in his voice from you. This is perfect.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Tyler in Colorado. I have a few comments I've built up over the course of listening to this podcast at work. I've enjoyed your Castlevania series, although I didn't play it, as well as your Resident Evil episodes, one of my favorites. Hope you get back to it soon. That one's on you, Mike.
That is all on me, and we will. I promise.
Yeah. Listening to the Castlevania one reminded me of a game I played on PlayStation called The Legacy of Kain. Curious if you guys tried it. I really didn't like it, or I didn't really like it, but the reason I bring it up is my friend has an old PlayStation 2 Capcom game, that's why I mentioned Resident Evil, called Haunting Grounds. My friend and I, back in like middle school, hung out one day, and I told him to try Kain to see if he liked it, and he told me to try Haunting Grounds because he was too scared of it. I absolutely loved Haunting Grounds, and he loved Kain, so we agreed to swap games like kids do. This game, along with Resident Evil, turned me into a horror junkie. Curious if you guys ever heard of that game, and if you could bring up some fun notes or anything you find about it on your next Resident Evil episode, since it's Capcom relevant. The two other people in the world that have played that game, and I would appreciate it.
No, that's great. I kind of like these horror games that aren't as famous, but are still good. So I will add Haunting Grounds to the list for sure.
I've never heard of Haunting Grounds.
I have never heard of it either. I've heard of Legacy of Kain. Definitely.
Yeah, I have. And I've heard it has a really, really great story. And that's one I went through a phase in like high school where I really wanted to play these story heavy games. I mean, I still do, but I did then too. And Legacy of Kain kept coming up when I would like Google video games with great stories. But I never played it. And but I've been meaning to.
Well, we'll chuck both of those on the list. All right.
Yeah. P.S. A question I had is, how did you guys come up with your gamer tags? My friends and I all have tags relevant to our names, and we never change them between Sony, Microsoft, and Steam because we identify by those names virtually, I guess you could say. Do you make yours relative to something in your life, or just make it whatever? My Sneaker Elf tag, I don't know how I came up with it because it was so long ago. It was literally in about middle school, probably, that I came up with it, that I really don't know where it came from. I think it has to do with... there was a person who used to be on Tech TV named Chris Perillo who hosted a show called Call for Help. And he always, like when you would email him, and he has a company now called this, but he was called Locker Gnome. I think it was sort of an attempt to do something similar to that. But that's really all I can remember about that era.
One night, but you had a dream of Legolas with Jordans on.
Yeah.
And that made you Sneaker Elf.
Oh, that would be a great idea for like a logo.
That's going to be your new origin story.
Yeah. But it turned out like a lot of those games or those like names that you make up for yourself when you're a small child turn out later to be just embarrassing and lame. I think Sneaker Elf is still kind of cool, so I just kept using it.
It's a great name. It's a great Twitter handle too.
What about yours?
Mine is Catamaran 360, and that is because Catamaran, I'm embarrassed, was the thing that we would say as our improv troupe in college.
Oh, yeah.
That was like our slogan. And my friend did, the improv troupe was called Nut House because of course it was. And his gamer tag was Nut House. And so then I didn't know what to make in 2008 for my gamer tag. And so I was just like, well, I'll just do the slogan and do Catamaran. And it's been that way ever since. And I've stuck with it. And it like, just like Tyler said, like I can't change my name because all my friends call me by it. Like, and it's funny. My buddy, he got his old name was inappropriate by Microsoft standards. And he got an absolutely like ridiculous generated name. And he kept it, and we call him by that dumb generated name now in person, like not even on video games, which is even more embarrassing. So I think that's important.
Oh, that's funny.
That's a great question. That's a great question.
Yeah. By the way, dear listener, that's where I first met Mike was at rehearsal for that improv troupe in college.
Yeah,
so
was I directing?
You were directing, yeah.
I was directing. There we go.
Yeah, and I wanted to leave halfway through it because we were like moving from one room to another, and I was like, this is my chance to dip out of here. You're gonna have to bleep that.
Yeah,
and
I'm gonna have to bleep that.
And I did. You did it, I left, and you came outside, and you're like, "Hey, man, we're moving to this other room." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I came back, and I ended up still having a lot of fun.
Wait, I made you stay?
You made me stay, yeah. After I was leaving, because that was my chance. But you made me stay, and I did, and I had fun.
That story is worth me editing.
Yeah, so that's the Mike and Tyler origin story.
That's good. That's perfect. It's a great
Tyler's
origin
email
story.
has a PPS. A month or so ago, you asked if people grew up in a younger era of games who could... Sorry, let me start over. A month or so ago, you asked if people that grew up in a younger era of games could play older Atari games and enjoy them. Well, I grew up in the original PlayStation era and had a old PS1 and PS2 growing up, but I did play Xbox and GameCube as well as old Nintendo games at other people's homes, and I can say I have way more nostalgia for PlayStation formats than others. For example, really the only game I have nostalgia for on GameCube is Luigi's Mansion. Other games I don't know anything about, and I'm curious about them, that's why I listen to you, but I don't think I'd be very committed to them if I tried them. The only other games I went back and played were old Final Fantasy games that I got on PlayStation Vita. Because I grew up with Final Fantasy 8 and 10, I always wanted to try the rest. Other games I played were Super Mario World 3, and Donkey Kong Country, which I went back and played, but never find myself wanting to play different games from that era.
That makes sense. No, I get that.
Yeah.
I totally get it. Like that's weird because I definitely feel like Super Mario World 3 and Donkey Kong Country were my growing up era, you know? Yep. And just like you, I mean, I'm not going to go back to Atari. Like I just can't, you know.
Not same. Like they're fine as novelties to like see how the era was, but I don't ever see myself getting into one of those. Whereas I could pick up a Super Nintendo game and get sucked into it, I think.
Actually, because I did shows last weekend where I was at, there was a barcade, and I went in and I played the original Donkey Kong. Like you got to climb up the ramps and the barrels are coming down.
Oh yeah.
And I was just like, this is just so punishingly hard. Like I just can't keep interest in it.
Yeah.
You know? It's
There's
just
like 4 levels and then you just start over again, but it goes faster.
Yeah.
You just keep playing until you lose.
Yeah. And I'm like, I feel like a terrible video game podcaster because I just don't care about playing this game anymore. Rather go play, they had that Rallycross game, you know, the top down one with the rally cars that you turn, there's like the 4 steering wheels. So fun. It's such a fun arcade game. It's so ridiculous too. Okay, sorry. We got one more PPPS.
Yeah, right? PPPS. I missed the old episodes when you told Tyler to say goodbye, Tyler, and he would literally say goodbye, Tyler. It felt very personalized to me.
Oh, nice.
That's from Tyler.
Well, we're gonna don't even worry about that. We might have you covered. All right, we got three more emails. You ready? These ones are shorter. All right, this is from Daniel from Arkansas. Hello, Mike and Tyler. I have a few suggestions for an episode or two that I think are amazing games. Vagrant Story. Never heard of that one. Do you know that one, Tyler?
Yeah, I think it's a JRPG on the original PlayStation. That's really all I know about it. I think it takes place in I want to say it takes place in the same world as Final Fantasy 12. I could be wrong, though. Maybe I'm thinking of something different.
Yeah. Okay. I've heard of The Legend of Dragoon. I've heard of that. And I've also heard of Skies of Arcadia. So I think those are two.
Oh, yeah. Skies of Arcadia is a good one. That's a classic JRPG on Dreamcast and GameCube.
Daniel's a JRPG fan. I'm going to throw those on the list. Don't even worry about it, Daniel. All right. I think you guys are beyond awesome. I am listening to the id episode 6 right now, and it's great so far. You guys are doing a great job. Keep it up. If you mentioned this in the show, it would be amazing. Oh, well, we just did. Thank you, Daniel from Arkansas in the great USA. That's what it says. So thanks for sending us the email, Daniel, and I will definitely add those to the list. And I feel like I need to play more JRPGs. The problem is I just don't have the time. They take up so much time.
Yeah.
You know? And I feel bad, like, playing 10 hours of a JRPG, knowing how much work the developer put into that to make it like something that you should follow the whole story of. I still feel bad for quitting Final Fantasy VIII when I was in like high school because I got stuck.
You can go back and finish it. It's got a remastered version now. Now's the time.
That is true. Because then you were the one that told me about the weird thing where the key to that game, if you play the original, is to not level up your character or something. So
yeah, that was a weird one.
All right, you got the next email? You ready for that one?
Yeah. This one is from BR. He says, "Hey, Tyler and Mike. First time emailer here. Just want to tell you I discovered your podcast around Christmas last year and have been having a blast catching up on episodes a few times a week since then. I love the initial book club feel to the show, but the later episodes have had so many great tangents and wonderful humor. I know actual live in-person shows would be nigh impossible, but consider this. Live stream an episode of the pod on Twitch. I've seen other podcasts use this to their success and would love to see you guys in action. I love the show. It's my absolute favorite, and I know you're both too humble to admit this, but the work you've been doing with the show is really important and a great way of preserving the knowledge of gaming history. Keep up the good work. Thanks, BR."
Thank you. That's nice. And I'm not opposed to this idea of the live
I'm not
stream.
opposed to it either. We have to look into how we want to do it. Like, do we want to have a visual component to it? And if that's the case, then we just need to figure out how far we want to go with that. If it's just our faces, or do we want to have like a slide deck prepare? That's a little bit more work, but could be worth it if we,
I think it would be just your webcam on Toby and Luna and my webcam on Delilah the cat, and then we just go. Probably it's probably the best.
That could probably work.
Sure. No, that's a great idea. For a lot of the reasons, like with the Twitch episodes or having a guest on, is I want to make sure when we do it, it sounds good.
Yeah.
Because that's a big thing with me. And we've had a couple episodes in the past where I've messed up some audio stuff and it didn't seem like no one really noticed, but it still irked me. And so I am really want to be careful on how we do that. So we'd have to do some tests, but that's definitely something we could do, I think. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
And I get to look at your face while we do this podcast.
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
It'd be fun. Right. There's also a PS on this email. Favorite games of all time. Mass Effect 2. Beat it in 122-hour sitting after receiving it for Christmas one year. That's
Mass
incredible.
Effect 2 is so good.
Yeah, it's very good.
It's very good.
Prince of Persia, Sands of Time. Also a great game. Bully. I hear that's a great game. Still haven't played it. Halo 3. Wonderful. Great choice. Number 5. SOCOM, U.S. Navy SEALs. Also a game I've heard is great. One of the first really popular online console games.
Yeah, SOCOM is actually something that I think would be worth doing a history on because it's so different, and it was like the early... It's a military game that advertised itself as being, I'm using realistic in quotes when I say that because it's third person, but did have a really big online presence. And I have some friends that were they never played Call of Duty. They only played SOCOM 2. So,
yeah,
it's a good topic. I'm excited to talk. We talk about that in the future. I want to put all these on the list if we haven't already talked about. Bully is also on my radar 100% as far as a game that was a cult classic that we need to cover. And I was wondering if that would be something we cover when we cover Rockstar or if we just do it separately. And I haven't decided yet. And Lord knows we have enough ideas. So, yeah. All right. Last email of the day. This is the subject line is Discovery Plus. This is from Burger Champ. One of the added benefits of Codex, A History of Video Games, is listening to Mike and Tyler play and discover new games and series. What other popular media franchises, movies, books, TV, etc., do you wish you knew more about? What other franchises do you feel you know about through cultural osmosis, despite having never experienced them firsthand? Oh, that's really good.
Wish I'd taken a minute to think about this one before.
I have some stuff. So,
okay, good.
As far as the first question goes about what other popular media franchises, movies, books, TV, etc., do you wish you knew more about? I feel very limited. And as a person who loves fantasy, like talking Lord of the Rings, fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
I have never read any real other fantasy, like Wheel of Time,
Yeah, me neither.
or like those big fantasy books. And I feel like I wish I knew more about them. As far as like cultural osmosis goes, I feel like I like the internet Reddit fads that you see, like, for example, Wall Street Bets. Like, the minute it gets on my radar, it's like I get really sucked into it. And the weird rabbit hole that I've been going down recently, and I know this wasn't Burger Champ's question, but it's what I want to talk about. I have become obsessed with the YouTube series Defunct Land, about amusement park attractions and amusement parks in general that have like closed down and why they've closed down. And it's like history. And it's very interesting to me. And I think it's because I love like stories like Jurassic Park or Westworld where amusement parks go horribly wrong. And this just is like a real life iteration of that. And it's really interesting. Defunct Land. It's a great, and they actually do a great episode on Disney Quest, which was Disney's attempt at a VR arcade.
Whoa.
And it's very interesting. And I was actually like, man, if I could do like, I guess it wouldn't be like, we could call it like extra credit, as in just like watch this other person's video, because it's really good. And they do a way better job than we've ever done as far as like research and stuff goes. And I'm like, I don't even want to do an episode on Disney Quest, because the person that does his name's Kevin Perger, that does Defunct Land. It's so good. I'll drop it in the Discord. It's an amazing coverage of like VR at the time. If we ever did a VR series, which I know we've talked about, it would definitely be something we'd have to cover, because this is like late 90s, early 2000s. VR doesn't look great, and it still might make you sick, VR, you know? But Disney's Imagineers are like super into it, is the future. So that's my side. Did you have anything you think of, Tyler?
No, I wish I knew a little bit more about anime than I do now, because I haven't really been able to get sucked into any, except for Full Metal Alchemist. I love the original Full Metal Alchemist series.
See, and I watched Brotherhood.
I'm making my way through Brotherhood now.
You are? You didn't even tell me.
Yeah, the past couple of weeks I've been watching some Brotherhood. I'm not sure if I like it as much as the original yet. I'm a little ways into the second part. I think part 2, like, because they're like broken up into 13 episode parts.
Y'all listen to this right now. This is the moment that Tyler and I had our first fight on the podcast. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, I think I feel like, and I guess I haven't watched the original series in 15 years, so maybe I'm wrong here about.
The reason I was told to watch Brotherhood from my good anime friend and very good streamer, Lisa Wallen, very, very good streamer. If you want to go look at a Twitch channel, Lisa Wallen, amazing Twitch channel. She told me to watch Brotherhood because that's the one that actually follows the manga more seriously. It does. And so that's why I watched that one.
Yeah. Hot take. I don't think it's as good.
Ooh, you know what? That's a spicy take, I think.
It's a spicy take. Well, and like I said, so it's been a while since I watched the original, so maybe I'm unfamiliar with the way it went down. But I remember some of the twists in the original being much later in the series. And there's some things that happened very early on in Brotherhood that are like, they're like big moments in the original, but they're not as big in Brotherhood because they happen so early on that you haven't had a chance to like build attachment to the characters and the situation that's happening.
Like a pacing thing almost.
What?
It's like a pacing thing almost for you.
Yeah. So maybe I need to make it through maybe what they do when they get past where the original anime went and they continue along the manga storyline, where, because like the original got past the manga and then sort of split off doing its own thing, like how Game of Thrones did, where they just sort of were like, well, we're past the books, I guess we'll start making it up ourselves now.
Yeah, they just YOLO it afterward.
Yeah, I liked what they did, but I can see a purist looking at that and going, well, that's not what the original art, like what the original author wanted, so here's the one that does what the original author wanted, and it's very different.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll get better once I get to those parts, and maybe there'll be some good stuff in there. But so far, where it's still covering ground of the original anime, I'm like, I think I like the original one better.
I've become more acquainted with it. I've been borrowing anime DVDs. I was borrowing Blu-rays, which was crazy to borrow a Blu-ray disc again from a friend. And watching more JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which is true. It is a bizarre adventure. They are not wrong. It's a very weird anime. I was loving that, though. I think I just don't have, like, because I agree, I should get more into anime. I think it's becoming increasingly more a part of pop culture, like world pop culture.
Yep.
And I agree with you that that's something I wish I also got into more often.
I'm watching the anime that just started for the World Ends With You, that game that came out on DS in like 2006. They're making a sequel to the game, and they started an anime like last week that goes over like the original storyline. So I was like, oh, I played the original game, loved it, but it's been a long time. So I was like, oh, well, I'll watch this anime while I get ready for the new one to come out, and then I won't have to play the original game. And it's so far, it's okay, but...
You know what one's good, and it's not necessarily anime, it's just in that kind of art style, is the Castlevania TV show on Netflix.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one's good.
Yeah, I don't think it's considered actual anime, because it's just that art style, but it's still a very fun series to watch. So,
yeah.
Cool. Well, that's actually we just did a little tangent. But the question
little anime
again
tangent.
Is, because I think Michael's, or Burger Champ, is asking this from everybody too, and we would like to hear from you. What other popular media franchises, movies, books, TV, etc., do you wish you knew more about, and what franchises do you feel you knew more about through cultural osmosis despite never having experienced them firsthand? Oh, I just thought of one. For some reason, I have a lot of people in my life that love The Bachelor, and I just get like all sorts of Bachelor stuff in my brain for never watching that TV show. You know, I just get opinions that I don't know why I have these opinions for a show I never watch. Like, I just don't understand.
That's funny.
Yeah, that's another one for me. Okay. Well, kind of a longer episode, which is good. You know, I think it's good to do a little bit longer sometimes.
But we didn't do one last week, so we have a lot of feelings.
Yeah, we have a lot of feelings this week. We're full of feelings, and we wanted to talk full of feelings and fusion. That's what we are this week. Okay. With that, though, if you want to send us an email, you can email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at @mecoletta or at sneakerelf, ELPH. And also the Discord link is on my Twitter profile, pinned to the top if you want to join the Discord. A lot of fun conversations in there. A lot of food pictures lately, which I've been really into, you know? Really love it. Also food pictures and cats and dog pictures, into that too. Great discussion. So we're there. Other than that, I think that's it. Do you want to say goodbye, Tyler?
Goodbye, Tyler.